There's a pretty tried and true trope, cliche, whatever you want to call it, that exists in many pieces of media that are centered around a cast of heroic characters, and that is, of course, everyone coming together to merge all of their powers into one in order to best the evil forces that threaten the world. Granted, this is a very classic trope while also being a very broad one, as it has seen many interpretations across different franchises. But I have to say, one of my favorite examples of this is the final Gattai Robos of Super Sentai. For some seasons, the final Gattai Robo comes in the form of new powers and machines the Rangers receive that end up being their main go-to robos until the end of the series. But some seasons will feature a plethora of machines that eventually come together as one, becoming the ultimate embodiment and representation of the entire season's mechanical might. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to take a look at the combining robots that feature most, if not all, existing machines within a season, resulting in what is typically known as the final Gattai, or otherwise affectionately labeled on the Power Rangers side, the Cluster Megazord. So let's final Gattai and get to it. Now, right off the bat, I do want to preface things by further clarifying what final Gattai Robos I'm considering in this video. Like I just mentioned, sometimes the Ranger team will obtain new and improved robos that end up being completely independent of their original set of machines. These are the robos I'm excluding from this conversation. While it is exciting to see what new robos a team may receive and how it may correlate to their newfound upgraded powers, they generally require the same baseline logic and creativity that their original ones do. Robos like Gao Icarus, Magilegend, Grateful Phoenix to name a few, while they end up being probably the team's strongest combined robo and are impressive in their own right, fall short of what I'm looking for in this video. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for that combined robo that takes almost every main machine you've seen in the season and slaps it onto one big massive mecha. In what I'll start referring to as the all Gattai of each season, you can start to see a lot of the foresight that goes into developing the concept for each team's robo. While the initial combination requires a great amount of engineering in itself, the connection mechanics in the all Gattai may drastically vary from the original combination, typically to make room for the other machines that will be joining the party. As always, we evaluate these on a scale that slightly mirrors the scale for general combiner robos, albeit with a few tweaks. The first is a given, creativity. You can't just expect to slam all the machines together and make it work. The All Gattai is a proper culmination of the power of this Sentai's concept and theme, so it has to be put together in a thoughtful manner. We did mention a bit about parts forming in that last Robo video, a term most typically referred when describing transformers that require figures to be taken apart and reassembled in order to complete their transformation. And while I generally dislike when something is done with mostly parts forming, the All Gattai is definitely where it gets a pass. Considering how many machines need to form one body, and how drastically the shape of each machine needs to change in order to fit this, it's not a detriment to its creativity at all, as the goal itself is ambitious, with parts forming being the least consequential aspect of its combination. The very notion of all these differently shaped and sized machines coming together is a uniquely creative task in itself, so I cut a lot of slack there. That being said, how they come together is one thing, another thing is the overall result, which can be judged by its shape and or silhouette. So by this, I actually mean a couple different things, one of which ties pretty closely with the creativity aspect. Sometimes, a final All Gattai may involve a supersized giant robo that integrates itself into the final combination as more of a base or holder for the rest. I tend not to like these as much. As funny and silly as it may be to see a top-heavy robot ride a mechanical Brachiosaurus, it does end up feeling a bit less creative since the Mount Robo's transformation is close to non-existent. It's also partly why I discounted O-Ranger's King Pyramider, which, while incorporating all the robos, mainly just stores everyone else in its back, therefore not really impacting the shape or image of the combination. The final result needs to have a daunting, imposing, and drastically different shape than its previous forms. That way, it can be a true representation of all these powers combining into one, rather than them all just sitting next to each other. Then there's probably the most obvious one, balance. For general combiner robos, especially if they consist of one machine for each ranger, the balance of representation is key in making the robot feel like a unified team mechanism. The very same can be said for the final All Gattai. For your typical combiners where each machine plays an almost equal part of the overall robo, the balance is probably more well distributed. For those combiners where one machine plays a greater part than most others, there is typically a predominant element that is present in the final form. This does come with its trade-offs. While the first example balances the machine representation well, it may be more difficult to find clever and streamlined ways to fit the rest together. While the latter example prioritizes one machine over many others, it may be the solution to integrating the rest of the machines as additions to the larger component. At the end of the day, say what we should end up with is a stunning example of what true Sentai teamwork is in robotic form. As you'd easily guess, not all these final combinations are made equally. At first, I just wanted to highlight a few of these that I really adored, but I think I actually have a lot more I'd like to comment on than I initially thought. So going back into tier list style, let's take a look at all of our final all Gattais we've gotten that combine all the Rangers machines into one. To reiterate my earlier points, I'm looking at combinations that involve most if not all of the Rangers mechas within the season. This means that the core of the combinations should still revolve around the original Robo, while utilizing other Ranger and auxiliary mecha as well. This results in some exclusions due to the reasoning I brought up earlier, with stronger combinations coming as a result of brand new machines. Among those, I already brought up Gal Icarus, Magi Legend, and Grateful Phoenix, since those seasons didn't have an all Gattai concept, with Super Muteki Shogun and VRV Robo joining them. I'll also be excluding Super Armor Shine Gingayo because it's just Gingayo with armor. I'm also excluding Heavy Armor Chi Palace and Side-Eye Gekirin Toja, which, even though I really wanted to add it in, is more of a formation than a combination. And lastly, I will also be excluding Super Turbo Builder and King Pyramiter Battle Formation, because like I said for Pyramiter, while both of which may be considered combined forms with the rest of the mecha, they are more so just placed within the base, so their presence in the combo is more or less inconsequential. With those out of the way, let's get this list started. First up, or 5 up, the Super 5 Robo from 5-Man. This combination is not bad. 5 Robo does get more heavily stacked by Star 5 from this combo, albeit with not much change to the overall silhouette. Still, I give it credit for pulling this off in its time period. Let's go with 3. Soaring up next, we have Great Icarus from Jetman, a combination of Jet Icarus and Jet Garuda. This one sort of follows the same style as Super 5 Robo, where you can clearly see additional embellishments that clearly integrate Garuda into the Robo. While I like the presence of the bird symbol in the center, I kind of wish it had more bird imagery in its overall shape. It's not bad, but I think it could have been more. 3 it is. Next is one we're all familiar with, Ultimate Daijujin from Zyuranger, combining Daijujin with Dragon Caesar and King Brachion. This is one that, while I realize many folks have a soft spot for, I really think it's just okay. Jutei Daijujin is already really clunky looking to me, and to throw him into King Brachion just always felt a tad bit lazy. So I'll give it a 2. And here we have Super Galaxy Mega from Mega Ranger. This one is a bit interesting because both Galaxy Mega and Delta Mega technically are not made of different machines, unless you count Galaxy Mega's head as a separate machine. Still, they found a pretty good way to combine the two, with elements of both being prominently displayed in its visual image. It's really good, but it's also really easy because it's only 2 Robos, so let's go 4. Coming to the rescue, we have Max Victory Robo from GoGo 5. This combination of Victory Robo and Liner Boy is okay, I think. Something I think it lacks is a visual representation of all of the Rangers. There's just a bit of blue for the legs and yellow and pink that peep out from the feet parts, but otherwise it just looks like a souped up Liner Boy. It's got a good silhouette though, those shoulder pieces are very cool. The M, I get it because of Max, but I do think of Mega Ranger when I see it. We'll go 3. Just in time is Time Robo Shadow from Time Ranger, combining Time Robo with Time Shadow. Time Robo is already an impressive robo by itself. The addition of Time Shadow is pretty simplistic in terms of execution, but it does have a sense of flair by being slightly different between its alpha and beta formations. It's not bad at all, it's a 3. From the shadows is the Tenrai Senpujin from Hurricaneger. Now, I'm evaluating this combination without the Revolver Mammoth, and I do so because on its own, this combination is still pretty insane. I think it's really impressive because Senpujin, Goraijin, and Tenkujin are amazing on their own, but when combined, they become even more dynamic and awe-inducing. My only note really is that I wish more elements of Senpujin were initially noticeable, because my attention is immediately drawn to the Tenkujin center and Goraijin arms. But very well done, it's a 5. Roaring up next is O Abareno from Aba Ranger. I almost didn't really include this because it doesn't involve any of the auxiliary mechs, but I mean it does involve the initial combined Robo. I think it's a strong combination, but I also think it's a bit uninspired. 2. Next is one of my favorites of the bunch, Super Deca Ranger Robo from Deca Ranger. Now, if there's anything cooler than robots, it's gotta be robots riding other robots to combine into a bigger robot. I just love how this combination is a result of Deca Ranger Robo riding the Deca Bike Robo, and the combined form is just so awesome. Simply put, it's powerful and impactful and gets a 5 from me. After we have another personal favorite of mine, Ultimate Daiboken from Bokenger. I feel like in terms of interchangeable mecha, Bokenger did one of the best jobs with this. Not only are these machines capable of becoming 2 robos by themselves as Daiboken and Daitanken, but they combine together in a way that initially seems busy, but is also very streamlined. Things just fit together and everything had a solid amount of representation, which is impressive for a 10-piece combiner. It's awesome, it's a 5 for me. Up next we have the Engine OG-12 from Goanger. Now, this stunning piece of machinery boasts 12 engines. While in my opinion it isn't as sleek as Ultimate Daiboken, it is still very impressive. These 12 engines are able to become 4 separate robos, and for them to come together as one is very impressive. I've always really liked G12, so it gets a 5 from me. Slicing it up next is Samurai Hao from Shinkenger. To be honest, I think this one is kind of the poster child for being a cluster. I will give it credit where it's due though. Conceptualizing this combination must have been super difficult. It ends up resolving a lot of different sizes and transformation styles among the machines to make something that really does exude power and might. It's just a shame that it feels incredibly top heavy, and Zoru and Kame at the bottom are just not as well executed. It's a really solid attempt though. 3 it is. Descending next is Ground Hyper Gosei Great from Goseiger. Goseiger's final all Gattai benefits a lot from the core mechanics being the headers. With that, Gosei Great itself is littered with ports that accommodate all the headers being slapped on there. So it saves them a lot of work, but I gotta say it doesn't look fantastic. It's very explicit in its embodiment of all the Goseiger powers, but it's really wacky and to be honest a bit uncreative as there is no added complexity to the Gattai. So it's a 2, sorry. Swinging in next is Kanzen Gokaio from Gokaiger, which actually is another questionable addition to the list. The only component from Gokaio present is Gokai Galleon, and it egregiously parts forms with Gojujin. I always found it interesting that Makalkin, a reference to Goonger, was a key part of the Gokaiger's ultimate formation. It just feels weird that their ultimate power requires something referenced from another season and not entirely original to its own, but that could just be me. Otherwise, it's kind of clunky and doesn't really well utilize or represent all the pieces available. It's a 1. Morphin up next is Great Go Buster from Go Busters. Now this is a solid all Gattai, everything is integrated very well into each other. If I had to make one complaint, I guess it's that Beat and Stag's main vehicle parts are just weapons, which does make sense, I'll give it that, but it's my own personal bias when most of a machine is used as a weapon or armament and not a core part of the formation. Very solid, very 4. Making a very big presence is Gigant Kyoryujin from Kyoryuger. To be honest, I've always disliked this combination. It feels horribly imbalanced from top to bottom, and the display of all the logos seems really tacky. It's going in the 1 crew. Rolling into the station is Tokyo Rainbow from Tokyuger. You know, I'll give them some credit, working with a lot of trains has to be a challenge in itself. They're all generally the same shape, so there's only so much you can do to add drastically different mechanics and engineering. The idea that the Hyper Resha is a train and also a terminal to house all the Reshas is really smart, and probably the only way they could have gone. I'm not a huge fan of how it looks, but I'm a huge fan of the idea of it. 3. Swooping in next is Hao Shurikenjin from Ninninger. Now, I decided to use Hao Shurikenjin instead of Hao Gekiatsu Daio because the prior does include the team's original combination. It's not my favorite combination, but to be fair, it does keep the idea of having a robo sitting in the center of the combination consistent. In that sense, it really is Shurikenjin on a big ol' red throne that is decked out with some Bison King parts. It's kinda funky, but not without some small bits of charm. I still can't be too nice to it though. 2. Next in all its blocky glory is a Wild Tosai Dodeka King from Zyuohger. I give credit similarly like I did for Tokyo Rainbow. The fact that almost all of these are pure cubes definitely presents its own challenges when trying to combine it into something dynamic. And while they do accomplish this with unique additions like Cube Rhinos and Cube Whale, it's the legs. These look so much like they didn't care to make them look like actual legs. It literally feels like when I had Legos as a kid and I made something with legs and no feet. This combination and honestly the entire Zyuohger mecha line does undoubtedly have its charm, but to be fair, I kinda have to give this a 2. Up next into the stars is Q-Tamajin from Q-Ranger. This final combo has a similar benefit that Goseiger has in that it places a majority of the focus in the Q-Tamas instead of the rest of their machines. Therefore, very similarly, the task becomes just slapping all the Q-Tamas on this combination of Shishi Voyager and Ho-Oh Voyager. I sort of get why they did this, but it also feels like a cop-out. I wish they did some more integration of the actual machines themselves. There's also the issue of scale, because those top few Q-Tamas are very inconsistently sized with the rest of them. It can join the Gosei group in the 2 crew. Next in line is the Good Cool Kaiser VSX from Lupin Ranger vs Pat Ranger. I don't have a lot to say about this other than it is not great. I don't mind Lupin Kaiser and Pat Kaiser at all, but this combined form with X-Emperor is kind of hideous. Its name is also terribly uninspired. It is neither good nor cool. 1. With the nightly entrance, we have King Kishiryu from Ryu Soldier. I was kind of debating whether to put this or Kishiryu 5 Knights on here, but technically King Kishiryu is the Ryu Soldier's most powerful combination. As such, it effectively strips off every other ranger color besides red in order to integrate it with Pterodon and Mosa Rex. This, like Kanzen Gokaio, is incredibly parts for me, and in my opinion, it doesn't seem like the appropriate representation of peak Ryu Soldier power. Like Gokaio, it will go in the 1s. Almost at the end, we have Zenryoku Zenkaiyo from Zenkaiger. Okay, this one I think is pretty darn cool. From the beginning, the Zenkaiger Gattais were comprised of 2 mechas combining into one, which is fine and all, but how would they ever all combine together? The missing piece was indeed Zenryoku Eagle, acting as a central connection for the Zenkaigers to combine and show off their awesome power. I do think it was a clever way to integrate the half-half combining style into a form that is daunting and also solidly represents everyone equally. It's a solid 4. Laughing up next, we have Toradora Oni Taijin Kiwami from Dawn Brothers. Now this is a chef's kiss. It's not news to anyone anymore that Oni Taijin was a technological marvel in the sea of Sentai Robos. However, I was just gonna give it high points for Toradora Oni Taijin and how it pretty effectively combines everyone's powers into one. But to also combine the Omikoshi Phoenix makes it even better. Toradora Oni Taijin Kiwami is a Sentai Robo lover's dream. 5. At last, we have God King Oger from King Oger. King Oger followed well in Oni Taijin's footsteps in being a dynamic Sentai Robo, and in true thematic fashion, God King Oger was the result of combining every shoe god, even the castle, into one. Symbolically, this is powerful. Visually, it's a bit of a mess. While everything does indeed fit on there, it does end up feeling a bit unbalanced and top-heavy, with way too many things sticking out to make it feel streamlined. It is a pretty crazy feat that they were able to put everything together, so I'll give it its due majestic kudos. Let's go 4. Final all Gattais are no easy task to execute. Through immaculate planning and conceptualization, the very best of these combinations are able to properly showcase the Ranger's mecha might in full and complete style. As we continue down the road with boonboomger, I'm looking forward to seeing how all these vehicles eventually come together to show off their Bakuage teamwork. Here's a full tier list on final all Gattai Robos. Wow, this was way more than I thought. A lot of this is based on my own biases and opinions, but what do you think? What are some of the all Gattai combinations you like? That's all I have for today. I'll be back next time with some more fun Toku topics to Toku talk about. See you all next time.